It's the 77 WABC News Hour.
Talking the news with Noam Laden.
All the news you need to know with Joe Nolan, traffic, Justin Ellick, sports. And now,
Talking the news with Noam
on 77 WABC.
Yes, that's me, 5 o'clock. Good morning. It is Tuesday, February 4th. Your forecast from the 77 WABC Weather Center. A mix of sun and clouds today. The high is going to be 47, but the temp is going to drop during the course of the afternoon. So tonight and overnight, it'll be colder, the low 26, and then Wednesday, more winter-like, cloudy, high 35. If you are walking out the door with us right now, it is 39 and cloudy in Muncie, up in Rockland County, 41 and cloudy in Hamburg over in New Jersey, and it's 45 and cloudy right outside our Midtown studios. Boy, we got a lot to get to as we work our way up, 6 o'clock hour, Sid and Friends in the morning. Of course, we are getting closer to a mayoral election. We have not found out from Mayor Adams whether he's going to run as a Republican or a Democrat or run at all for that matter. But when you see some of these polls that are coming out in the last couple weeks about how New Yorkers view this city, whoever decides to run is going to have a lot to fix and a lot ahead of them. New Yorkers' outlooks on the city's future seem to be just as bleak as the winter weather. A poll from Honan Strategy Group reveals 75% of Democrats, these are Democrats, believe New York City is in crisis, and their main concern is crime right now.
Well, crime is at its all-time high. I don't feel safe. Not even like what they consider the nice parts of the neighborhoods. It's like people can get shot on 42nd Street.
You can't ride the subway. I don't even get on the subway anymore. After they burnt the person, that was it for me.
This is across the board with Democrats who were answering these questions in Midtown yesterday. At least 45% of people who took part in the survey say they plan to leave New York City if things get worse.
It's random now, so it's like it's not contained, so it's just anywhere.
I don't know if I've actually seen the uptick in crime as much personally, but, I have the Citizen app, and it shows a lot of crime all over my neighborhood. I saw recently that my subway stop, 59th and Lex, is the second highest one for crime.
Yeah, the poll also revealed 85% of people surveyed think embattled Mayor Eric Adams, should not run for re-election. And when you hear this poll, and you realize there's a big void that needs to be filled. The question will be who's going to fill that void. Could it be another 4 years for Mayor Adams? Could it be Andrew Cuomo? Could it be our own Curtis Sliwa? It's going to be an awfully interesting race. Down to Washington, where crews started removing the wreckage from the Potomac near the nation's capital yesterday following that crash of the American Airlines jet and the Army Black Hawk helicopter. Correspondent Tom Costello is at the scene.
Special salvage cranes are in position to begin lifting the wreckage of American Flight 5342 from the icy water. Recovery teams hope they will quickly find the victims who have not yet been found.
The equipment was moved into place in the river over the weekend after several days of surveying the site. At least 55 victims of Wednesday's crash, there were 67 in all, have been reportedly found, identified. Costello reports that investigators are hoping the black box from the helicopter, which has not been found yet, but the black box from the American Airlines flight will show what happened, show the altitude and everything like that.
Air traffic control radar indicated it was at 200 feet, the maximum allowed. But the plane's black box showed the crash happened at roughly 325 feet, and the jet slightly pulled up 1 second before impact. Investigators have interviewed the controllers who were on duty. The transportation secretary confirms the tower was understaffed, as it often is. For years, the airport and local politicians have warned Reagan Airport's airspace is too congested.
And we continue to hear the stories of people who were aboard that plane. Sometimes it takes a couple days till we get the whole narrative of these people who are on the plane. Of course, each story is awful in its own. Chris Collins is someone who's local. He was one of the victims in the crash, being remembered for his active volunteer work and love for animals at a Connecticut dog shelter up in Stamford. He worked at Lucky Dog Refuge. He was on the plane, the 42-year-old, because he was on a business trip. And he had put in over 150 hours at this dog shelter. And the people who work there say he just really had a special way with animals there. In fact, there was one dog that he had walked recently named Splash, who had taken a liking to him.
You would have thought that Splash had known Chris, and he had been her person her entire life.
So Chris Collins was on this plane with Melissa Nenkandri. She's the woman from Brooklyn who was killed in the crash. They were on this business trip together for Moody's Investor Services, and the people, again, at the shelter just raving about what a great guy Chris Collins was.
He's really just defined by his compassion, by his kindness, by his patience, his easy smile, his ability to make everybody feel comfortable and safe.
And all those workers at the shelter, of course, heartbroken for his family, especially his widow, Jen.
When I say that Chris was thoughtful, so is his wife. Even with everything that she's going through, she's been checking in on us.
And, the pilot of the plane was identified as a Brooklyn native, Jonathan Campos, and Denisa Brown Elder, a flight attendant, she was raised in Brooklyn. And the investigation, it continues into the crash of the medical transport jet in northeast Philadelphia that killed 7 on Friday night.
If you look at the impact and how deep that crater is, it was a very steep angle at which that aircraft came down. Transportation
Secretary Sean Duffy there at a Monday press conference. 6 people on board the plane were killed. Another person on the ground died. This was the awful story. I mean, again, all of these are awful stories. But this was a transport plane that was bringing a young girl who had gone through some sort of medical procedure and had gotten her life back after being at Shriners, Philadelphia for 4 months. And were bringing her and her mother back to Mexico because she had recovered. And that's when the plane crashed. So 24 people on the ground were injured, 4 remain hospitalized.
Even though this crash was so devastating, there are remains, whether it's the engines, the wings, that they can look at and get answers to what took place here.
Yeah, and so far they really don't have a whole lot of answers. Philadelphia's mayor taking part in this press conference with Sean Duffy yesterday.
When you look through the footage and you think about what could have been, had a gas line been hit.
Yeah, I mean, the good news here is more people were not killed. I mean, because of where the plane crashed in such a dense area, it could have been a whole lot worse. WABC News Time 5:08. Let's go down to Washington, D.C. President Trump says tariffs on Mexico going to be put on hold for 1 month. Trump's decision comes after he spoke with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum yesterday.
We've agreed to talk and consider various other things. We haven't agreed on tariffs yet, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. But we have a very good relationship.
In a post on X, of course, formerly known as Twitter, Sheinbaum says Mexico will send 10,000 National Guard members to the U.S. border to prevent drug trafficking in the U.S. And that's what Trump was trying to push for. On Truth Social, Trump said the U.S. will negotiate with Mexico to attempt to get a deal done between the two countries.
Canada is very tough. They're very, very tough to do business with. And we can't let them take advantage of the U.S.
Yeah, so in the afternoon, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issued a statement saying Mr. Trump is pausing tariffs on Canadian imports for at least 30 days following a pair of phone calls between the two leaders. In return, Trudeau says Canada is implementing a $1.3 billion plan to protect the northern border. Mr. Trump, President Trump, confirmed that deal yesterday, saying he's very pleased with the initial outcome and that the tariffs on both Canada and on Mexico have been paused for a 30-day period as they work all this deal out. Now, the 10% tariff on China is set to begin today, but maybe there's some sort of deal the president's trying to work out there. Of course, we'll watch that as the day goes on. Meanwhile, El Salvador says it will house violent U.S. criminals and take in deportees of any nationality. Secretary of State Marco Rubio making this announcement yesterday after meeting with El Salvador's president, calling it an act of extraordinary friendship.
MS-13, Tren de Aragua, whatever it may be, he has offered his jails so we can send them here and he will put them in his jails. And he's also offered to do the same for dangerous criminals currently in custody and serving their sentences in the United States. even if they're U.S. citizens or legal residents.
Of course, one of the big stories since the president took office is these deportation orders that have gone forward with ICE agents and others, finding criminals that have committed crimes here, illegal immigrants that have committed crimes here, and sending them back to their home countries. There are reports that the Trump administration is setting a quota for ICE agents, asking for 1,800 arrests per day. Democrats fear that the pressure will lead to citizens or people with green cards being swept up in the immigration raids.
In New Jersey, for example, there was a U.S. citizen veteran who was detained and had his military credentials questioned.
Now, he was detained. He was let go. San Antonio's Congressman Joaquin Castro there points to an operation in the 1950s, which was run under President Eisenhower. There were between 1 and 2 million U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents who were deported to Mexico by mistake. Of course, it was a long time ago, but here's Joaquin Castro.
When you do things like put quotas on people, it means that you're going to be targeting people who aren't criminals, people who have been here 20 or 30 years, who've been paying their taxes, who've been abiding by the law, and all of a sudden you're going to rip them out.
Yeah, so far we have not heard of that type of thing happening, though before the show is out, we're going to hear from the head of ICE in New Jersey in the next half hour, talking about who they're going after in the Garden State. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he's now the acting director of U.S. Aid. He criticized the agency responsible for foreign aid.
It's been 20 or 30 years where people have tried to reform it, and it refuses to reform. It refuses to cooperate. When we were in Congress, we couldn't even get answers to basic questions about programs. That will not continue. That's not going to continue.
It all comes after Elon Musk says the agency responsible for foreign aid is beyond repair and that the Trump administration is working to shut it down. Trump administration removed two top security officials at USAID over the weekend when they tried to stop Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, from entering restricted part of its headquarters as it did an investigation of where this money is being spent.
It is an entity that spends taxpayer dollars, and it needs to spend it, as the statute says, in alignment with the policy directives that they get from the Secretary of State, the National Security Council, and the President.
And the Secretary of State, who, of course, was a senator until he became Secretary of State, says he had issues with USAID while he was in Congress.
Okay, we would ask them questions. Who does this program fund? Who gets the money? We won't tell you. We don't need to tell you. We're apolitical. Well, American foreign policy isn't apolitical. American foreign policy is to further the interest of the United States.
USAID is the largest distributor of foreign aid in the world. It gave some $72 billion last year to programs for everything from women's health and AIDS treatments to to anti-corruption efforts and access to clean water. 5:13, big day for Israel's Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, who will meet with President Trump today. Correspondent Giles Gibson is in D.C.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to be the first foreign leader to meet President Trump at the White House since his inauguration. As he boarded his flight to the U.S., he said their talks will focus on securing the release of Israeli hostages as well as Iran.
Netanyahu's visit comes as negotiations are expected to resume between Israel and Hamas to extend the ongoing ceasefire. They're at part 2 of this ceasefire. In a letter to Netanyahu, President Trump said he looks forward to discussing how they can bring peace to Israel in their efforts to counter what they call their shared adversaries. More from Giles Gibson, who's in D.C. today.
Now, this is a critical moment in the Gaza ceasefire deal, with talks set to begin this week on moving on to the second phase of the agreement. That includes the release of all remaining Israeli hostages, as well as the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza.
And, of course, it's a big deal for the Israeli Prime Minister, as he's the first international guest, foreign leader, who will visit the White House. That'll happen a little bit later today. 5:15, let's head over to the 77 WABC Sports Desk. Good morning, Justin Alec.
Good morning, Noam Layden. We'll start here with NBA action at MSG, where Jalen Brunson had 42 points and 10 assists, breaking a tie with Carmelo Anthony for third on the franchise list with his 18th 40-point game with the Knicks. And the Knicks beat the visiting Houston Rockets 124-118. Hall of Famers Patrick Ewing and Bernard King are the only players with more 40-point games as a Knick than Brunson, who's only in his third season with the team. The point guard scored 17 points in the fourth quarter to bring the Knicks back in a game they trailed by 11 after 3. Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges each added 22 points for the Knicks. Josh Hart had 19. New York played without starting forward OG Anunoby for the first time this season because of a sprained right foot. It's a quick turnaround for the Knicks, who are up in Toronto tonight to battle the Raptors at 7:30, while the Nets simultaneously return to action at home against the aforementioned Rockets. Checking in on the NHL, where it was a silent night last night locally. Looking ahead to tonight, though, the Islanders will lace them up at 7:30 at home against the Vegas Golden Knights after the Devils get underway at 7 p.m. in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. Finally, out of the NFL, as Super Bowl festivities got underway with opening night of media availability for both the Eagles and the Chiefs. Some more early offseason news trickled in as well. Star defensive end Myles Garrett, the NFL's reigning Defensive Player of the Year, has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. He announced in a statement yesterday speculation over Garrett's future in Cleveland had ramped up in recent months after he made comments about wanting to know the team's offseason plans following the 3-14 season before further committing to the organization. The 29-year-old has 2 years remaining on the record-breaking 5-year, $125 million extension he signed in 2020, but no more guaranteed salary. That is your Sports Gnome, and I'm Justin Ellick on 77 WABC.
WABC News Time 518. Tulsi Gabbard's nomination for National Intelligence Director has the support now of a key Senate Republican.
Senator Susan Collins from Maine announced Monday she'll vote for Gabbard, which means the former Congresswoman from Hawaii will likely be confirmed. Collins said that during the confirmation hearing and closed-door meetings, Gabbard addressed her concerns regarding her views on Edward Snowden. Snowden leaked classified information during his time as a National Security Agency contractor. If confirmed, Gabbard would oversee 18 agencies and organizations under the intelligence umbrella. I'm Brian Shook.
Out to California. Boy, the weather there and the wildfires. What a mess it's been over the last couple months. The California Governor's Office of Emergency Services is now saying they're prepared for heavy rains. That's forecast for much of the state over the coming days.
We have swiftwater rescue teams that will be available, pre-positioned in the event that we have flooding emergencies and we need to rescue people.
So, of course, the fear is the water, the rain, the mudslides in these burn-scarred areas where the wildfires just whipped through over the last couple weeks. And they're telling people who still have their homes in those areas that now they have to worry about mudslides and rains and that they should keep their ears and eyes open.
We could have major problems, and that's why we want people to be informed, have a plan, and heed emergency authorities who say it's time to evacuate.
Boy, they just can't get a break.
We want to caution people that are in the areas that could receive really heavy rainfall, that it could create a flash flood event, especially around the burn scars, and not just from last summer, but several years ago.
And it's Northern California, too, by the way. They could receive between 2 and 8 inches of rain over the next couple of days. Back down to Washington, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says it is a new era at the southern border. Hegseth, along with the White House border czar, Tom Homan, they visited El Paso, Texas yesterday to meet with troops that are manning the border.
Guys and gals of my generation have spent decades in foreign countries guarding other people's borders. It's about time we secure our own border.
During his stop, the defense secretary told reporters President Trump has charged the military with gaining 100% control of the southern border.
Tens of millions of people have poured across this border under Joe Biden's administration, unchecked. We have no idea who they are. We have no idea where they're coming from. We have no idea what their intentions are. The charge that the president has given us to get 100% operational control of the southern border.
President Trump declaring, of course, a national emergency at the border, signed several executive orders to crack down on immigration at the start of his second term. Meanwhile, the president creating an American sovereign wealth fund. He spoke at a signing of an executive order in the Oval Office yesterday, suggested that this fund could help with the purchase of TikTok. Of course, people like me, we don't want TikTok to go away.
So other countries have sovereign wealth funds, and they're much smaller countries, and they're not the United States. We have tremendous potential in this country, tremendous. You're seeing that, what's happened just in a short period of time.
The president said this fund would be used to invest in things like airports, medical research, and highways, and maybe even to buy TikTok.
As an example, TikTok, we're going to be doing something perhaps with TikTok, and perhaps not. If we make the right deal, we'll do it. Otherwise, we won't. But I have the right to do that, and we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund, whatever we make, or if we do a partnership with very wealthy people. I think in a short period of time, we'd have one of the biggest funds, and some of them are pretty large. I must tell you, some of the Saudi Arabia fund is on the large side, but eventually we'll catch it. But we're going to create a lot of wealth for the fund.
Now, Sovereign Wealth Fund is the first ever to be established in the history of the U.S. Texas may soon have prayer in public school. State lawmakers there filing a bill directing public school leaders to listen to families that have been calling for a moment of silence in public schools.
This is all about local control. Local school boards can decide if they want to do this or they don't.
Lawmakers filing this legislation that would require the Ten Commandments be posted in all public classrooms as well. That's being tried, by the way, in neighboring Louisiana. It's tied up in a legal battle. Now they want to try it in Texas.
It's about reminding people about the principles that our country and our state were built on. People that truly want to pray, teachers and students, should have that opportunity in Texas.
And while we're in Texas, there's a growing number of measles cases in Texas involving people who refuse to be vaccinated. Experts warn this could quickly get out of control.
We're starting to see significant enough declines in vaccination rates to see more and more of these sporadic measles cases and ultimately measles outbreaks.
Baylor infectious disease expert Dr. Peter Hotez there says measles is one of the easiest viruses to spread. And because of that, he says that this is a canary in the coal mine with low vaccination rates. The latest outbreak is in Lubbock. 2 school-age children who were unvaccinated tested positive for measles. Of course, they were in classrooms, and now they're worried about this spreading all over the place.
In the pre-vaccine era, measles peaked in March and April. So guess where we're heading soon, into March and April. This is a sign that, we could be in for significantly more numbers of measles cases in the coming weeks.
Hotez telling people who have not vaccinated their kids for measles to do so. 525. It was 5 years ago that the Department of Homeland Security began sending all flights from China to one of 11 U.S. airports with enhanced screening, with very little known about the spreading of COVID at the time. The epidemiologist, doctor at Florida International University, says COVID, of course, is now an endemic as opposed to an epidemic.
We're living with it. It's not going away, but it's not causing the devastating effects that it caused several years ago.
And this was the prediction back then, that there would be general immunity to COVID, and for the most part that seems to be playing out.
If we're faced with another pandemic, there may be different challenges that we'll have to be exposed to, but I think there were a lot of things that were learned as a result of this pandemic.
While we're doing some health news, new study finds the average human brain contains a spoonful of microplastics.
A new study published Monday in the journal Nature Medicine found that there was about 7 grams in the average brain, about as much as you'd find in a plastic disposable spoon. The amount of plastic in brains increased dramatically between 2016 and 2024. Livers and kidneys also showed increases, but the concentrations in brains was 30 times greater. People with dementia had the highest levels. The health implications of microplastics in the brain are, as of yet, unclear. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
The FDA is upping its broccoli recall, its most serious category now.
California company Braga Fresh initially issued an advisory for a specific lot of its broccoli florets in December after Health and Human Services workers found listeria in several samples from a Texas Walmart. No illnesses have been reported. The product was distributed to Walmart stores in 20 states across the nation.
It's the 77 WABC News Hour.
Talking the news with Noam Laden.
All the news you need to know with Joe Nolan, traffic, Justin Ellick, sports. And now,
Talking the news with Noam
on 77 WABC.
Yes, that's me, 534. Good morning. It is Tuesday, February 4th. Your forecast from the 77 WABC Weather Center. A mix of sun and clouds today. The high is going to be 47, but the temp is going to fall throughout the day, and there's going to be some intense winds, so it's probably going to feel like it's in the 30s. Tonight and overnight, colder, low 26, and then Wednesday, cloudy, high 35 if you are walking out the door with us right now. So happy you are. It's 39 and cloudy in Muncie up in Rockland County, 41 and cloudy in Hamburg over in New Jersey, and it's 45 and cloudy right outside our Midtown studios. We'll start this half hour over in New Jersey, where New Jersey's top immigration official issuing this stern warning to migrants illegally in the U.S. as families start to cope with these fears over deportation and these ICE raids continue across the tri-state. John Sukaris is with Newark ICE Field's office. He's the director there, and he wants you to know, if you did cross the border illegally, no matter whether you've been here for years since and have lived here legally, they may still come after you.
We can't say that if you're here illegally and following the law, we're not going to go after you. If we encounter you, we'll make a decision. But I don't want to put out a message that we will not. You're okay to stay. You're here illegally. You shouldn't be here.
Sukaris, who was talking to CBS News, acknowledged the fear that ICE enforcement's raising with law-abiding migrants, but he says it doesn't matter. They broke the law if they came here illegally. But he says his agents won't go after people who want to become legal.
If they filed for asylum, they're going through the immigration court. So those individuals we would not target for arrest. Everyone that comes in has a right to go before the immigration court and have their case heard.
Sukaris says the federal agency's mission has always been to identify, arrest, and then deport undocumented violent criminals. In January, it expanded to those who were ordered deportation as well as those who have not applied for asylum. So people who've committed the crime of crossing the border illegally. And he says if they run into these people, he says they're not necessarily actively going after them, but if they run into these people, they could be sent back home.
It depends on the situation, but most individuals, they don't apply for asylum, but all our operations are targeted. We know who we're going after. We're not just out in the community just looking for anyone at random.
And he has the backing of most Americans. Voters in a recent Siena College research poll overwhelmingly favored deporting criminal immigrants with 79% support, 11% in opposition. I want to make those 11%. In the poll, 42% say they oppose deporting migrants who are in the U.S. illegally with no criminal record. WABC News Time 539. Do you remember we did this story yesterday? Governor Murphy was speaking to a group of liberal voters at Montclair State University over the weekend when he said that he had an illegal immigrant living in his mansion. And here's what he said about that.
And we said, you know what? Let's have her live at our house above our garage. And good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her.
Yeah, so he was daring the feds to come and get this illegal immigrant who was living in his home. He refused to give any more specific details about this woman or why he was housing her in defiance of federal law. And then yesterday, this is just strange, his spokespeople came out and said that they were walking back those comments. They said that Murphy wasn't talking about anybody living in his home. He was referring to a legal resident who's in his circle of friends who was worried about President Trump's return to the White House. But wait a second. This is what he said.
And we said, you know what? Let's have her live at our house above our garage. And good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her.
Yeah, but this rep for the governor yesterday said no one's ever lived in his home under those circumstances. When they were asked to explain why he said there was somebody living in his mansion in Middletown, they really couldn't come up with much of an answer. President Trump, of course, wanting to use these tariffs as a negotiating tool to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into the U.S., and it's already working, at least with Mexico, which has agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border and is getting a 1-month pause on tariffs. Same goes up for Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada. But produce purveyors at the Hunts Point Market in the Bronx, they're not taking any chances. They're planning ahead, worried that the pause on 25% tariffs for Mexico might not hold.
In order to make sure we have a secure food system here in the U.S., we need to be able to import these products to either fill gaps in supply or even have that product all together, because it might not grow in this climate.
You're talking about things like avocados. That's Stephanie Katzman. She's with Katzman Produce. Says her job is to make sure the tri-state restaurants and supermarkets have what they need, including tomatoes, avocados, and blueberries, which all seem to come from Mexico. So she's asking the White House that fruits and vegetables be excluded from any future U.S. tariffs, saying it would make produce unaffordable for many people, especially low-income families.
If the costs go up 25% on these berries behind me, consumers are really going to feel that impact in their pocket. Fresh fruits and vegetables are normally more expensive than some alternative processed foods. So unfortunately, this is going to have an even bigger impact on them.
And she says importing from anywhere else is only, just might not work.
We need to supplement from other countries. That's why we're asking for an exemption with tariffs around fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, Mayor Adams, he was talking about this yesterday as well. He said he was reviewing how the Trump administration's potential tariffs against Canada and Mexico would impact New Yorkers, holding a press conference.
We are looking at that. This is new. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people are making, there are knee-jerk reactions to everything. We're not going to do that. We're going to analyze. We're going to understand what the real impact, so that we're not giving out mis or false information.
So he said his first fear was just prices going up at the supermarket.
Well, let's be clear. We cannot have porous borders. We have to make sure that our borders are secured. It's a public safety issue. And public safety, as you heard me say over and over again, is a prerequisite to our prosperity.
All right, so if you've been following this tariff story, or if you haven't, they were supposed to go into effect today. But the President Trump, says he's made a deal with the president of Mexico, Sheinbaum, where she'll send 10,000 National Guard members to the U.S. border to prevent drug trafficking into the U.S. So that will put the tariffs on pause for Mexico. And then yesterday afternoon, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issuing a statement saying that he and the president have agreed on pausing tariffs on Canadian imports for at least 30 days because Trudeau says Canada will implement a $1.3 billion plan to protect the northern border. So the president going for what he wanted, and apparently got that yesterday. What happens in 30 days from now? Well, that's anybody's guess. 5:43, Mayor Adams also unveiling an initiative to revitalize office spaces across the city, holding a press conference about this yesterday. The new effort he dubs Race for Space will offer credits to incentivize large out-of-state companies to sign leases for at least 20,000 square foot spaces at certain office buildings. Of course, a lot of office buildings have not come back since the pandemic as people work from home.
Right now, there are a record number of jobs in the city, yes, but we want to make sure we occupy many of our office spaces. And despite of the historic growth, too many offices are still empty, and too many storefronts remain vacant.
The goal is to target at least 15 well-known companies to rent out a total of 800,000 square feet by the end of the year. The announcement comes as the Adams administration touts its all-time high jobs record for the 8th time, they say, since the mayor took office.
So we're going to go bigger and bolder at every stage of the game, bringing in new businesses, even as we build more capacity.
Yeah, of course, the other issue is congestion pricing. When it talk about getting these people back into office buildings, if they're not taking public transportation, hardly anybody wants to pay that $9 a pull. And in this era of congestion pricing, commuters in Central and South Jersey have another option for getting to Lower Manhattan.
Well, if you're not going to drive in because you don't want to pay the congestion pricing toll, or if New Jersey Transit trains and buses aren't an option, unless you're chartering a helicopter, the water is the next best option. And so New York Waterway has expanded ferry service from South Amboy, New Jersey to Wall Street Pier 11. And that's in addition to stops at Brookfield Place and West 39th Street. Those started back in October of 2023. James Flippin for 77 WABC News.
WABC News Time 5:45. Let's head over to the 77 WABC Sports Desk and Justin Ella.
Thank you, Noam. And we'll start here with NBA action at the Garden. Jalen Brunson had 42 points and 10 assists, breaking a tie with Carmelo Anthony for third on the franchise list with his 18th 40-point game with the Knicks. And New York beat the visiting Houston Rockets 124-118. Hall of Famers Patrick Ewing and Bernard King are the only players with more 40-point games as a Knick than Brunson, who is in his third season with the team. The point guard scored 17 points in the fourth quarter to bring the Knicks back in a game. They trailed by 11 after 3. Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges each added 22 points for the Knicks. Josh Hart had 19. New York played without starting forward OG Anunoby for the first time this season because of a sprained right foot. It's a quick turnaround for the Knicks, who are up in Toronto tonight to battle the Raptors at 7:30, while the Nets simultaneously return to action at home against the aforementioned Rockets. Checking in on the NHL, where it was a silent night last night locally. Looking ahead to tonight, though, the Islanders will lace them up at 7:30 at home against the Vegas Golden Knights after the Devils get underway at 7 p.m. in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. Finally, out of the NFL, as Super Bowl festivities got underway with opening night of media availability for both the Eagles and the Chiefs. Some more early offseason news trickled in as well. Star defensive end Myles Garrett, the NFL's reigning Defensive Player of the Year, has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. He announced in a statement yesterday. Speculation over Garrett's future in Cleveland had ramped up in recent months after he made comments about wanting to know the team's offseason plans following a 3-14 season before further committing to the organization. The 29-year-old has 2 years remaining on the record-breaking 5-year, $125 million extension he signed in 2020, but no more guaranteed salary. That's your Sports Know, and I'm Justin Ellick on 77 WABC.
WABC News Time 5:49. Let's go out to Suffolk County, Long Island, where police arrested a Selden man for allegedly burglarizing at least 9 businesses on the island. This dates back to November of last year. They really wanted to find this guy. They found him over the weekend after he apparently had allegedly burglarized a Subway in Selden in the morning. They caught up with him. His name is Michael Parise. He's 49 years old. He had busted into a whole bunch of kind of strange places to go if you're looking for cash, if you ask me anyway. One of them, an animal hospital. And the woman who works in the animal hospital, she agrees. She says, it's a little strange that if you're looking for money, you come to us.
It's a sad situation. Unfortunately, the only thing that was really taken from our hospital was the donation bin that we have.
Yeah, so during the investigation over the weekend after they caught him allegedly breaking into this Subway restaurant, Parisi, they connected him to 9 more investigations of robberies, including a Subway, a Korean barbecue place, and an Orange Theory Fitness, which also seems like a strange place to break into in the middle of the night looking for cash.
I'm really glad they got him. I mean, what kind of scum is that, breaking into 9 different places?
Honestly, why are you robbing how much could they have in their register?
Yeah, I mean, just does seem that the brightest guy. He broke into a bagel cafe, allegedly, Stony Brook, another cafe in Coram, a barber shop in Smithtown.
I was up all night last night, just uncomfortable, and even we were talking about it just before, how you come in here and you think you're safe at work, and then you come in and now you feel completely exposed.
Yeah, you do feel violated when that kind of thing happens, but now they have this guy and they think he's connected to all 9 of those robberies. A man clearing snow off his car in Paterson, New Jersey yesterday morning. Maybe you weren't hit by this, but we got an inch or two of snow in New Jersey yesterday. He was cleaning off his car. This was 8:30 in the morning in Paterson. And all of a sudden, an SUV flies by him. It loses control. It smacks into this individual, this 59-year-old, and kills him. And the driver, instead of staying at the scene, and what clearly looked from the surveillance cameras is to be just an accident. He slid on the road. He drives away. So he leaves Abel Herrera outside his family's car, dead on the road. His wife, is inside the car. So she had to witness this whole thing. And here's the daughter who had just come home from vacation to be told that her father had been killed in a hit and run.
I was on a trip, a vacation. Just for 3-4 days. They come back to receive this news. Just to stop and help him.
Herrera's wife was sitting inside the car at the time.
She was in the car. She saw everything.
Yeah, so the family said speeding is a frequent problem on their street, and they've asked local lawmakers to address that. One local Paterson City Councilman, Luis Velez, says he plans to address the issue of speeding on this street on the meeting tonight, a city council meeting.
Because some of these roads are exit to Route 80,
And, people just use it as escape out of the city.
But, of course, the issue at hand here is this driver hit somebody, left him, Mr. Herrera, for dead. And if he had stayed at the scene, it probably would have just been ruled an accident. I mean, from the surveillance video, it just looks like his SUV slid on the snow and then ran into this individual. But then, of course, he races off, and that makes it a huge crime.
Go to the police and say it was you. Just think it was your dad. I don't know, your father or grandfather. It's not fair. It's not fair for us.
I mean, surrender yourself, man. It's an accident. It happens. Nobody's perfect. Just surrender yourself. Now it's worse because now you fled the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's always worse when you leave the scene. Police are searching for this trio of men. It looks to be men. They're all dressed in black, so we're not 100% sure, who show up and have shown up at jewelry stores across New York City with sledgehammers. And if they can get into the store, they break through cases and steal jewelry. Otherwise, they try to break through the front window of a store and get in that way. And they tried to break into a store in Brooklyn over the weekend, Lamar Jewelry. But this guy who owns the store, he has really thick glass. And so the sledgehammers only, broke the glass, but they couldn't break through. So it was this very intense scene where they showed up. It was early evening, and they tried to break through this glass, triple pane glass, and they weren't able to do so.
Somebody crazy.
Yeah, so that's the owner of the store. His name is Fwazi Ayub, and says, thank God his glass held up. Now he'll have to pay for it to be reinstalled, about $15,000 to have it replaced. But these three police think were involved in a number of jewelry robberies, one in Jackson Heights, Queens, where they got away with $800,000 worth of jewelry, doing the same thing, taking sledgehammers to the front window of the store. Now, go back to this individual, Fwazi Ayub, who owns the store on Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn, says, these guys, if they just worked hard in school or found a job, they wouldn't have to live this kind of life.
Somebody's supposed to tell them, if you work, hard work, or if you go to school, you will be a doctor, you will be a lawyer, but now you lost your life.
Yeah, well, I think it's too late for them. There is a new law in New York State to help further protect doctors from legal trouble for prescribing abortion medication out of state.
Providing abortion care by telehealth or mail can be a life-saving intervention for people living in states where their most basic right to control their own bodies is denied.
Governor Hochul there signing legislation yesterday allows doctors to request pharmacies to put their health practice on the prescription label rather than the doctor's name when prescribing FDA-approved abortion medication. This builds upon some previously passed legislation that helps protect New York doctors from states with strict abortion laws that may attempt to impose criminal penalties on New York doctors.
As other states turn to the dark ages, New York remains committed to being the light, a beacon for reproductive freedom. I basically said there's no way in hell they'll ever respond to a request to extradite this individual and face criminal charges.
Yeah, and just last week, a jury in Louisiana indicted Dr. Margaret Carpenter, an Ulster County, New York doctor with a practice in New Paltz, for approving abortion medication for a minor in Louisiana. They caught the two of the 4 or 5 teenagers they're looking for who took a R train on a joyride last week. We told you about this story. A 15-year-old from Brooklyn, a 17-year-old from the Bronx, charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and possession of burglary tools. They still haven't really figured out exactly how they were able to get on this train and then pilot the train at 30 miles per hour at some point, blowing through one station in signals. Riders, of course, they want to know, how are they able to pilot a train?
They don't know what dangers, who they could hurt. They could hurt themselves, but they could hurt others. So it's sad.
Yeah, of course. 5 individuals in all were apparently involved in this. They have 3 in custody. They took a train, left 36th Street Station in Sunset Park. There's a bunch of charges that are going to be slapped against these teenagers, but the head of the MTA, Jano Lieber, says he's seen this before, where they slap teens with charges for crimes that are kind of similar to this, and then they just let them go. And he says it should be different this time.
Can we please not just give them a slap on the wrist and send them home to mom? It tends to be, teenagers who are enthralled with the subway system. We'd love them to grow up and become responsible train operators, but they can't do this.
Yeah, so police confirming that they have those few in custody. They're still looking for 2 other teens they say were involved in that joyride.